Happy to be back, everyone. I've had a couple of setbacks. Things are happening all the time, of course. I've been delving into the destruction of democracy in my country, which is Canada. I've been doing some research. We have a new Prime Minister here named Justin Trudeau, who's from the province of Quebec. But where I'm currently working in British Columbia, he also owns a townhouse here. I've been in his townhouse one time. He has very interesting pictures of his family, which looks to me like he bought them all at Walmart, and they're kind of a scramble. I don't see any mommy, daddies, or his brothers. He has a half-sister. I'm not sure where she's living, but anyway, let's go on. He's been making appointments across Canada, and I've noticed that primarily he's using people from his home province of Quebec. And he recently made an appointment for the elections. Canada is what it is. And the man's name is Stephane Perrault. He is a lawyer from the province of Quebec. Now, he was acting Elections Canada head. And I've written to him and congratulated him on his position. I would like to interview him. I don't know if that will ever happen, because I just to be honest with you, in Canada, government people do not get interviewed here, especially in particular judges. Judges do not allow any interviews. You can't get any information on a judge in Canada. Very bare bones, if at all. They're all politically appointed. None of them has ever answered a question from a member of the public in a public forum. Never happened in this country, and never going to happen in this country. And the reason it doesn't happen is to make sure that the system protects itself. It is as close to a fascist regime as I think you can get. And there are others that don't get asked any questions as well. The police in particular, they don't give out any information, and sometimes people are very badly injured or killed while in the custody of the police or in a jail cell in Canada, and there is no investigation, and certainly no charges are laid, which is very suspicious in a free and democratic society. I like to quote a man named John Fitzgerald Kennedy, because I think he was at the time warning all people in the world of this globalization movement, and you can't have globalization unless you can control the judges, because you don't want cases that the people in the public are using to protect themselves, either to protect their job or their security or their privacy. You would make sure that you could subjugate the people without providing any hope whatsoever of finding justice, which is what Canada has done. We had our top judge was a woman. She's just resigned. Not that she wanted to, because she was 75 years old. However, she studied philosophy for 6 years, and she also has an LLB, a law degree, and somehow became the top judge in Canada. And no one knows how that happened. I know who did it. It was a Prime Minister from Quebec named Brian Mulroney. He named her first. And then another Prime Minister from Quebec, Jean Chrétien, he promoted her to the top judge's position. Both men are from Quebec, both men are lawyers from Quebec, and both men studied Napoleonic Code. If they studied English common law, they haven't made me aware of it or anybody else. Under Napoleonic Code, the government is protected from the people. Napoleon changed the word monarchy or crown to state. And of the 10 worst performing countries in the world, socially and economically, 7 have Napoleonic Code. If you wanted to be a dictator, you should seriously think of Napoleonic Code, and it is the laws of Quebec. We used to have an English common law in the rest of Canada, but because the Prime Ministers of Quebec have been filling the courtrooms with lawyers who became judges and are from the province of Quebec, there has been, you see, English common law and Napoleonic Code butt heads, because the basis of English common law says that the people are protected from the abuses of the crown, and Canada is a monarchy. The head of the government of Canada is the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II, who's actually of German descent, by the way. And Prince Philip, his real name is Battenberg. He goes by the name of Mountbatten. It's an assumed name, an alias. They don't call it that, though, in Canada. You can't say that Prince Philip operates under an alias. His real name is Battenberg. I think we should be using it. The Queen of England's real name is quite long, and it's all German. I think there's 4 German names, all hyphenated. It's very hard to find this information anymore because it's not convenient. It's like Al Gore. It's not convenient. So anyway, in Canada we have 2 opposing systems of law, and recently it's been Napoleonic Code throughout Canada. The top judge here, her name is Beverly Ann McLaughlin. She's actually German as well. Her last name is Gitz. She's of German heritage. In Canada, she said when she was resigning, she said she's not aware of any problems in our legal system, and that the legal system of Canada is a model for the world. Well, we have more than 45,000 outstanding cases that judges will not make a ruling on in Canada because they have been instructed by Parliament not to do so. So even though you think you can protect yourself from the abuses of the Crown, the government of Canada, you can't. The Parliament says no. All judges in Canada used to be independent, and they're not anymore. The judges of Canada come under the direct supervision or control of the government, Parliament, which is essentially, it's the Prime Minister we're talking about here. There is no parliamentary committee that gets together to talk to judges and say, well, you can't hear that one, and God Almighty, don't pay out that one. I'll give you a good example here. This guy named Omar Khadr, without the Prime Minister's help, he couldn't get his $10.5 million bucks. And Mr. Khadr, his check was written, delivered, cashed, cleared on one day. By the direction of the Government of Canada, they made sure this happened. Government of Canada's own direction to do it. Nobody protested, nobody said anything. However, he's responsible for the death of 1 U.S. military soldier and the injury and possibly maiming of a second. Now, Prime Minister previous to Justin Trudeau, his name was Stephen Harper, he called Omar Khadr a terrorist. Justin Trudeau saw it completely differently. He was a child warrior, and he couldn't do this, and he couldn't do that, and couldn't do something else, and he deserves the $10.5 million bucks. I personally feel quite differently about that. However, I'm not in the government of Canada, and probably never will be. However, let's just go back to, that's the purveyance of Napoleonic Code. When it's almost like we should do the North Korean thing, you know, one of the Kims up there. In North Korea, their leader is called our dear leader. That's how they have to say it. That's how they address him, our dear leader. We are nearly at that level in Canada where we have to call our Prime Minister our dear leader. We're almost there. He can't be removed from office. There is no way to do it since our new Constitution of 1981. It's been left out. There is no way to remove a sitting Prime Minister if he went wacko. And I'm not going to give an opinion on that. I think there's something wrong for sure. And I don't think it's democracy anymore. Now, I just want to get to my point of democracy. We had another Prime Minister named Jean Chrétien. He was from the province of Quebec, and he was a very great friend of a man named William Jefferson Clinton. He loved William Jefferson Clinton. He couldn't get enough of William Jefferson Clinton. I don't think they ever played golf together, but as he calls him, Bill, he and Bill were tight. Anyway, so what happened was Jean Chrétien couldn't win an election in Quebec, so he convinced his friend, his name is his name is Genet, is his last name, I've forgotten his first name, to run as the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party in the riding that Jean Chrétien wanted to run in. And they made a deal. Genet would do so, and he did, in return for Jean Chrétien getting a prestigious job for his son. And Jean Chrétien, of course, didn't give him the job in Quebec. He gave it to him in Canada. We have 2 countries here anyway. We actually have 3. But I'll just keep it to 2. So he gave him a job in Banff, Alberta, Parks Canada. Prestigious job, good money, benefits. Anyway, Jean Chrétien was the Minister for Parks, so he used a bribe, compliments of Canada, and he convinced Genet that he should run so ineptly that the people in that riding will have no choice but to vote for Jean Chrétien, and he will get his seat back. And as John Fitzgerald Kennedy used to say, these things are abhorrent in a free and democratic society. But in Canada, nobody notices this, especially not newspaper reporters or journalists, because in Canada, we have a lot of journalists who end up in our Senate, which is people who are appointed by the Prime Minister of the country. And if you talk the right way and make sure some details are not reported, the Prime Minister might reward you with a seat in the Senate, and the bed is made for you. It's perfect. It's perfect. Would that it were so simple. However, let's get back to Jean Chrétien. He gets the seat. He's very happy. Politically, things change and they're out. Well, they lose the leader of the party, the Liberal Party. So Jean Charest doesn't have a seat, but he runs for leadership, and he wins the leadership. But now he doesn't have a seat. Can't get elected in Quebec because everybody in Quebec, eventually all this dirty laundry gets done in Quebec, and even though the people of Quebec have Napoleonic code, they can still vote with their feet or not vote, which brings up a problem with who's counting the votes. So he came to my riding, Beausejour riding in New Brunswick, and there was a man there who was a Liberal, of course, and he'd been there for a few years in the seat. And my riding has only ever been Liberal. I don't think it's ever been anything else but Liberal. There is no such thing as anybody upsetting a Liberal Party there. It cannot be done. So Jean Chrétien comes flying in, and so all of a sudden, the guy resigns his seat, and Jean Chrétien stands in there and gets elected. And he had the help of a woman named Marilyn Trenham from the little town that I went to school in. She used to be a medical doctor. And I was there when she's bringing him around to all the restaurants. I happened to be visiting at home, and here we are in the Subway restaurant, and Chrétien comes in with Marilyn Trenham, and he's shaking hands, and kissing babies like the politicians do. So when he came to my table, there's a red-haired woman sitting with me, her and her boyfriend. They got married later, and my professor friend, Mac. I'm going to use his name as Mac. It's not his name, but it's close enough. Jean Chrétien comes to our table, and he has a very strong French accent. Hello, I am the guy who's going to be vote here, that one on this one. So he's shaking hands around the table, and I'm listening to him talk. He's a tall man, Anyway, he said, he looked at the red-haired woman, and he says, "You are looking exactly like woman in my riding. Exactly liking her." So my friend, Professor Mack, he says, "I thought this was your riding." Chrétien stood bolt straight, and he said, "That is what I meant." And he walked around to other tables, and we sort of chuckled a bit, right? So anyway, he wins the riding. There's no such thing as losing that riding. But I've always had this question, and we discussed this. How big a bribe did Chrétien pay to get this man to resign his position? I'm willing to bet you, I should have kept track of it. I wish I had, because I'm willing to bet you he was rewarded when Chrétien gets to be not just leader of the party, he gets a seat in Parliament now, compliments of the people of Beausejour, my riding, and then he becomes the Prime Minister, of course, and I'm willing to bet you he rewarded that man in Beausejour riding with a seat in the Senate. I know he rewarded Marilyn Trenham with a seat in the Senate. That's how we do things in Canada. It's bribery and the reward for doing a dirty deed to make sure democracy is defeated and fascism is installed in its place. If you can rig an election, as Jean Chrétien has done, I would call it rigging. In fact, I wrote a letter and mailed it yesterday to the new Elections Canada guy. His name is Stephane Perrault. I hope I've said his name right. And it appears to me he's pretty tight in the Liberal Party, and I don't know this for sure. But Justin Trudeau was gushing about his credentials when he named him. And he is a lawyer. Now, as I mentioned before, in Quebec they have Napoleonic code. They don't have English common law. Only in criminal proceedings, apparently, English common law. But in Canada, when you're arrested, we have a presumption of guilt over innocence. That's the way we do it here. And Beverly Ann McLaughlin doesn't see anything wrong with that. I personally see something wrong with it, but she says nothing's wrong with it. She's not aware of any problems at all. She's not aware of the 45,000 outstanding cases. She's not aware of this presumption of guilt before innocence. She is not aware of it. That's crazy, of course, but there you go. Those are her own words. I hope I haven't read into it, except she should be very well versed in law. She should be keeping up with current events. Whether or not she is, I don't know. However, the political masters, because the judges of Canada are under the control of the government now. They are not independent. No judge in Canada has ever run for an election. No judge in Canada has ever stood the scrutiny of the public. It has never happened in our history, and it will never happen. We're as close to a dictatorship as you can possibly get. There is no justice. There isn't going to be any. There is no privacy. Canada Post is one of the world's largest spy agencies. I should know. I have a briefcase of envelopes and I kept them all after they opened them, and then they delivered them to me. And in some cases, I have to go to the RCMP to get my mail. They refuse to answer. I've gone to court. The judges won't listen to me. They rub their noses. They rub their eyes. They look at the clock. And then they give the Crown another 30 days to respond to my request. You know, no judge in Canada gives a member of the public an extra 30 days. It does not happen. But all the judges of Canada owe their job to a politician, and that's a fact. That is a very sad fact in this country. Let's get back to Jean Chrétien for a moment. So he pays bribes for his positions. Okay, bribery, as we know now, is very big in Canada. The other Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney, who is also from Quebec and also a lawyer from Quebec, and probably studied Napoleonic Code. I would like to know. In fact, I asked this new guy, Mr. Perrault, I wanted to know about his education. Which law did you, what university did you go to? Did you study English common law, or did you study Napoleonic Code? Because if you're going to be a lawyer in Quebec, it has to be Napoleonic Code. It has to be, where the state is protected from the people. The people cannot find justice in that country. It's terrible. However, let's go on. So now, Mr. Perrault, I'm hoping, is going to return. I asked him, and I congratulated him on his job. I mean, obviously, you know, you've rubbed the right elbows, you've said all the right things, and the Prime Minister likes the cut of your jib, and you're in for Elections Canada. So I asked him, can you subvert democracy by offering a bribe? Does Jean Chrétien get away with this? Not just once. I believe he's done it twice. And the second time, he decided to hide it, to cover his tracks pretty well. You know, even though he made a mistake about the red-haired girl in the restaurant, thinking that she's from his riding. He only has one riding. It's in Quebec. When he won my riding, Beauséjour, he went to Ottawa. Never returned. Never. I mean, what do we do with this guy? Well, where's our representative? He didn't represent us. He's only got one thing on his mind. He wants to be the Prime Minister of the country. And he still likes his, I think he's from Shawinigan. I'm not sure of the name of his riding. He's pumped he's pumped $2 billion in job creation there. Canada, money from Canada. I have to say this. It's money from Canada that goes to Quebec. In this province where I'm working, he took $500 million in job retraining money and took it all and gave it all to Quebec. He blamed it on the minister. What's the minister's name? I believe it's Doug Young. Someone can correct me if they like. But that's how fascists work. You use a middleman. I know he had the students out here pepper sprayed at the University of British Columbia, and he blamed it on somebody else, of course. And he fought hard in Parliament to kill this. We had this new tax brought to us by Brian Mulroney from Quebec, and it was called the GST. Anyway, that the GST thing, Chrétien blamed it on a woman, Sheila Copps. And he got her to resign her position because she lied to the people. Well, so did he. He certainly did. There's video of him in Parliament saying he would kill it, kill it, kill it. When he became the Prime Minister, he kept it, because it generates so much money, tax money for the Government of Canada. The Government of Canada loves tax money. All governments live on money. I mean, we all know that. It's not a surprise here. However, I'm going to have to get off because I'm running out of time. I'm going to come back very shortly. Thanks for hanging in there. Everybody have a nice day.